After I take this lesson, you will be able to know about the various human resource management practices and programs. You will also know about the types of trainings that are required in HRM, what kind of training is required for employees, and the types of practices and training effectiveness. You will also understand the usefulness of such practices in HRM. So now let's start with what HRM is. Human resource management is the management process of an organization's workforce or human resource. It is responsible for the attraction, selection, training, assessment, and rewarding of employees, while also overseeing organizational leadership and culture and ensuring compliance with employment and labor laws. In circumstances where employees desire and are legally authorized to hold a collective bargaining agreement, human resource will also serve as the company's primary liaison with the employees' representatives. Human resource is a product of the human relations movement of the early 20th century, when researchers began documenting ways of creating business value through the strategic management of the workforce. The function, which initially dominated by transactional work such as payroll and benefit administration, but due to globalization, company consolidation, technological advancement, and further research, HR now focuses on strategic initiatives like mergers and acquisitions, talent management, succession planning, industrial and labor, and diversity and inclusion. Moving on to what are the functions of human resource management. The first function is that of recruitment and selection. It is a process in an organization to increase the efficiency of job and helps in fulfilling the vacancies. Second function is that of personnel administration. It is the management and regulation of employees in an organization. Training and development. Organizational activity aimed at bettering the performance of individuals and groups in organizational settings. Performance and reward management. It is the linkage between the performance and reward system to maximize the business performance. It also helps in talent management. Talent management refers to the anticipation of required human capital for an organization and the planning to meet those needs. Succession and career planning, which is the process for identifying and developing internal people with the potential to fill key business leadership positions in the company. Labor relations. Labor relations is the study and practice of managing unionized employment situations. In academia, labor relations is frequently a sub-area within industrial relations. And lastly, HR planning. To ensure adequate human resource to meet the strategic goals and operational plans. I will now talk about the history of human resource. Human resource generated from the human relations movement, which began in the early 20th century due to work of Frederick Taylor in 1856 to 1915. Taylor explored what he termed scientific management, which was later referred to by others as Taylorism, which was striving to improve economic efficiency in manufacturing jobs. He eventually keyed in one of the principal inputs into the manufacturing process, labor, sparking inquiry into the workforce productivity. The movement was formalized following the research of Elton Mayo and others, whose Hawthorne studies documented how stimuli unrelated to financial compensation and working conditions, such as attention and engagement, yielded more productive workers. Contemporary work by Abraham Maslow, Kurt Lewin, Max Weber, Friedrich Herzberg, and David McClelland formed the basis for studies in organizational behavior and organizational theory giving room for an applied discipline. Moving on to the scope of human resource management. Human resources are undoubtedly the key resources in an organization, the easiest and probably the most difficult to manage. The objectives of the HRM span right from the manpower needs assessment to management and retention of the same. To this effect, human resource management is responsible for effective designing and implementation of various policies, procedures, and programs. It is all about developing and managing knowledge, skills, creativity, aptitude, and talent, and using them optimally. Human resource management is not just limited to manage and optimally exploit human intellect. It also focuses on managing physical and emotional capital of employees. Considering the intricacies involved, the scope of HRM is widening with every passing day. It covers, but is not limited to, HR planning, hiring, that is the recruitment and selection, trainings and development, payroll management, rewards and recognitions, industrial relations, grievance handling, legal procedures, etc. So, in other words, we can say that it's about developing and managing harmonious relationships at workplace and striking a balance between the organizational goals and the individual goals. The scope of HRM is extensive and very far reaching. Therefore, it is very difficult to define it concisely. However, we may classify the same as follows. HRM in personnel management. This is typically direct manpower management that involves manpower planning, hiring, that is recruitment and training, recruitment and selection, training and development, induction and orientation, transfer, promotion, compensation, layoff and retrenchment, and employee productivity. The overall objective here is to ascertain individual growth, development and effectiveness, which indirectly contributes to organizational development. HRM in employee welfare. This particular aspect of HRM deals with working conditions and amenities at workplace. This includes a wide array of responsibilities and service such as safety services, health services, welfare funds, social security and medical services. It also covers appointment of safety officers, making the environment worth working, eliminating workplace hazards, support by top management, job safety, safeguarding machinery, cleanliness, proper ventilation and lighting, sanitation, medical care, sickness benefits, employee injury benefits, personal injury benefits, maternity benefits, unemployment benefits, and family benefits. Moving on to HRM in industrial relations. Since it is a highly sensitive area, it needs careful interactions with labor or employee unions, addressing their grievances and settling the disputes effectively in order to maintain peace and harmony in the organizations. It is the art and science of understanding the employment, that is the union and management relations, joint consultation, disciplinary procedures, solving problems with mutual efforts, understanding human behavior and maintaining work relations, collective bargaining and settlement of disputes. Now I'm going to talk about selection practices in human resource management. It is very important in any corporate or human resource field to hire the correct applicant for the required job. To acquire any job, the applicant goes through 3 stages of selection. First is initial selection, second is substantive selection, and finally it is contingent selection. Now what is initial selection? Here we check if the applicant meets the basic qualifications for a job, and the applicant, if he doesn't meet the basic qualifications, are rejected. In substantive selection, we determine the most qualified among the ones who meet the basic requirements, and applicants who meet the basic requirement but are less qualified are again rejected. In contingent selection, final check before the job is offered to the applicant is done, and the applicant best qualified but one who fails the contingent selection, like for example positive drug test, background test, etc., are rejected. I will emphasize on initial selection now. Initial selection devices are the first rough cuts used to decide whether the applicant meets the basic qualification of a job. Application forms, including recommendation and resumes, are initial selection devices. Nowadays, e-recruiting is becoming very popular, especially among organizations with job domain compared to the companies without such domain. Organization with a job domain usually offers direct navigation in their advertising campaigns and monitor the average number of clicks it takes for job candidates. Within the initial selection, there are two aspects to it. Number one is the application form. The application form is not a very reliable method for valid information. However, it can be very good for initial screening. Example, there is no point interacting with the nurse for the position if she does not have the enough education and required qualification. However, online application forms are good enough because they can be directly reached to the person responsible for making decisions. Secondly, background checks. Almost every employee provides some reference check on application forms at some point in hiring process. It's to check what applicant did in the past jobs and whether the former employers provide some kind of useful information. Letter of recommendations are a form of background checks. Now I'm going to talk about substantive selection. If the applicant passes the initial screen, next are the substantive selection methods. This is the process that includes written tests, performance tests and interviews. Written tests are paper pencil tests that are most frequently used, and the typical written tests include something like intelligence or cognitive ability tests, for example the Raven's progressive matrices, personality tests like for example draw person test, integrity tests, for example overt integrity tests, interest inventories such as the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Thus, such tests have been of great help, and mechanical ability, perceptual accuracy and motor ability have proven to be valid predictors of many skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled operative jobs in industrial organizations. Also within the substantive tests, there are work sample tests. These are hands-on simulations of part or all the job that work has to be performed by the applicants. Now, by carefully devising work samples based on specific job tasks, management determines the knowledge, skills and abilities needed for each job. Work samples are widely used for hiring of skilled workers such as welders, mechanists and electricians. A more elaborative set of performance simulation tests, especially designed to evaluate a candidate's managerial potential, are administered in assessment centers. In these, executives, supervisors and trained professionals and psychologists evaluate candidates, so they go through several days of exercise required for simulation. The final is the contingent selection. When applicants are ready to pass the substantive selection methods, they are basically ready to be hired, contingent on a final selection. Common method of contingent selection is drug test. For example, the public's grocery store makes tentative offers to the applicant contingent on their passing a drug test. Publix is ready to make an offer to the applicant as long the person checks to be drug free. Employers might encounter this view with the arguments that the drug use and abuse are extremely costly, not just in terms of financial resources, but also in terms of people's safety. Drug tests are not actually cheap. If the first test turns out to be positive, then the result is reanalyzed to make sure. Contrary to popular claims, the tests generally are quite accurate and the results are not easily faked. Moving on to training and development programs. Training and development is the field which is concerned with organizational activity aimed at bettering the performance of individuals and groups in organizational settings. It has been known by several names including human resource development and learning and development. Harrison observes that the name was endlessly debated by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development during its review of professional standards in 1999-2000. Employee development was seen as too evocative of the master-slave relationship between the employer and the employee for those who refer to their employees as partners or associates to feel comfortable with. Human resource development was rejected by academics who objected to the idea that people were resources, an idea that they felt to be demeaning to the individual. Eventually, the CIPD settled upon learning and development, although that was itself not free from problems. Learning being an overgeneral and ambiguous name. Moreover, the field is still widely known by other names. I'm moving on to training now. Training, as we know, is an activity both focused upon and evaluated against the job that an individual currently holds. Education. This activity focuses upon the jobs that an individual may potentially hold in the future and is evaluated against those jobs. Development. This activity focuses upon the activities that an organization employing the individual or the individual is a part of may partake in the future and is almost impossible to evaluate. I'm going to talk about types of training now. Training can include everything from teaching employees to on-the-job training, including basic literary skills. Technology-based learning. The forms of training with technology are almost unlimited. A trainer also gets more of the learner's involvement than in any other environment, and trainees have the benefit of learning at their own pace. For example, in an engineering industry, one can imagine interactive multimedia training on engineers, followed by a proficiency test to see how well the employees know the machinery. Next is on-the-job training. Jumping right into work from day one can sometimes be the most effective type of training. Now, on-the-job training gives employees motivation to start the job. Some reports indicate that people learn more effectively if they learn hands-on rather than listening to an instructor. However, this method might not be for everyone as it could be quite stressful. For example, new engineering employees could work with experienced engineers. They could ask questions about way stations, proper technical ways, picking up tools or any other issues that may arise. The third form of training is coaching or mentoring. Coaching mentoring gives employees a chance to receive training one-on-one from an experienced professional. This usually takes place after another more formal process has already taken place to expand on what trainees have already learned. Coaching mentoring gives trainees the chance to ask questions and receive thorough and honest answers, something that they might not receive in a classroom with a group of people. Example, again, engineers could gain valuable knowledge from more experienced engineers using this method. Next is lectures. Lectures, is the most traditional form of giving training, and it usually takes place in a classroom format. It seems the only advantage to lecture is the ability to get a huge amount of information to a lot of people in a short span of time. It has been said to be the least effective of all training methods. In many cases, lectures contain no form of interaction from the trainer to the trainee, and it can be quite boring. Studies show that people only retain 20% of what they have been taught in a lecture. For example, Engineers could receive lectures on issues such as company policies and safety. Now, we talk about technical skills, which is another form of training. Technical skills focuses on teaching individuals new technology and providing them with essential updates of technology and structural designs. Technical training also has become important because of the changing designs in an organization. For example, engineers could be taught about the machinery usage and system. Interpersonal skills. All employees belong to the work unit and their work performance depends on the some degree of their ability to effectively interact with co-workers and their boss. Some employees have excellent personal relations, but others requires training. For example, engineers are taught the way of interacting with customers and consumers. Let me summarize what I have taught you. Human resource management, HRM or simply HR, is a function in organizations designed to maximize employee performance of an employer's strategic objectives. HR is primarily concerned with the management of people within organizations, focusing on policies and systems. HR departments and units in organizations typically undertake a number of activities, including employee recruitment, training, development, performance appraisal and rewarding. HR is also concerned with industrial relations, that is, the balancing of organizational practices with requirements arising from collective bargaining and from governmental laws. HR is a product of the human relations movement of the early 20th century, when researchers began documenting ways of creating business value through the strategic management of workforce. The function was initially dominated by transactional work, such as payroll and benefits administration. But due to globalization, company consolidation, technological advancements and further research, HR, as of 2015, focuses on strategic initiatives like mergers and acquisitions, talent management, succession planning, industrial and labor relations, diversity and inclusion. In startup companies, HR duties may be performed by trained professionals. In larger companies, an entire functional group is typically dedicated to the discipline, with staff specializing in various HR tasks and functional leadership, engaging in strategic decision making across the business. To train practitioners for the profession, institutions of higher education, professional associations, and companies themselves have created programs of study dedicated explicitly to the duties of the function. Academic and practitioner organizations likewise seek to engage and further the field of HR, as evidenced by several field-specific publications. HR is also a field of research study that is popular within the field of management and industrial organizational psychology, with research articles appearing in a number of academic journals. In the current global work environment, most companies focus on lowering employee turnover and on retaining the talent and knowledge field by their workforce. New hiring not only entails a high cost, but it also increases the risk of newcomer not being able to replace the person who was working in the position before. HR departments also strive to offer benefits that will appeal to workers, thus reducing the risk of losing corporate knowledge. Every applicant for job requirement passes through 3 stages of selection, and only if one level is cleared, then only the individual reaches the next level. Most training programs work rather well in majority of people who undergo training and learn more than those who do not. The success of training also depends on the individual, if they are motivated enough to learn from training sessions rather than just being a part of it. Training climate is also important when the applicant sees that opportunity is good enough and there are enough resources, they feel motivated to work.